Hello and welcome to the AgCulture Podcast, where we share insights about the future of agriculture. Each week, we dive into the stories, technology, and ideas shaping a profitable and sustainable future for farms and rural communities alike. I'm Paul Windemuller, host of the AgCulture Podcast, and today I had the honor of talking with a friend of mine that I've made through Nuffield Scholarship Program. He's a fellow Nuffield Scholar, 2024 scholar like myself. We met first a little over a year and a half ago in Brazil and really enjoyed getting to know Tom and found his topic that he was studying in Nuffield very fascinating. He's looking at first generation farm operators and trying to figure out how to spread the information about how to get into farming from a first generation perspective. Tom and his wife Amy are both first generation farmers on the south coast of South Australia. There they farm 200 hectares or 500 acres of ground for beef cattle. Tom grew up in the city and has a background in accounting. Now he still does some of that work today off of his farm, out of his office at his farm remotely, but he's hoping very shortly to be full-time farming. And what I appreciate about Tom is his humility, but also unique perspective at how he looks at things from his business standpoint. He's done very well through some really big challenges that we'll talk about in this episode. And he just has a great way, a great perspective on how to glean information and knowledge from people and apply that. So I really appreciate that about Tom. Really enjoyed getting to know him, had the opportunity and pleasure of hosting him at our farm for a few days, about a month and a half ago, 2 months ago now. And just really enjoyed sharing that time with him. It was a really neat experience to have him here and have some really good discussions about first generation farming. But if you're not a first generation farmer, you are still going to glean a lot of good information and get to hear a really cool story from Tom. So listen up. I hope you enjoy this episode with Tom Cosentino. Tom Cosentino, welcome to the AgCulture Podcast. Excited to have you here today, and we've had some great stories and some great times together already. I'm looking forward to our conversation today and following up on some of the things that we had talked about when you were out visiting me about a month or two ago. So welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Paul. It's great to hear your voice again, mate. One of the very few United States accents I get to hear in this corner of South Australia. So it's always a pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me on. And super keen to share some of those stories post visiting you because you were the first stop on that trip. So I've kind of kept you in the loop on WhatsApp with a few photos and things, but I haven't shared the full detail. So ready to do that today for sure.
Awesome. Well, before we get into some of that stuff, as you said, you're coming to us from South Australia, right along the coast from your beautiful little slice of heaven there, right on the coast of South Australia.
That's it.
And
that's it. So
you came about owning that farm like every other person that's in agriculture coming from an accountant background, right?
Yeah, it feels that way, mate. Certainly in the Nuffield sphere, there's a lot of accountants turned farmers for sure. There must be something about the numbers, the collections that draws us to farming. But I'm on that list, so no farming background, no family farming background either. Went through uni, did a law and commerce degree. I worked as an accountant for a few years, but always had the itch from a very young stage of life that I wanted to farm something. I wasn't quite sure exactly, but I live in a part of the world where we've got a thriving sheep industry, and there's a cattle industry on our doorstep. And yeah, it's a bit of a journey to get to where I am. But yeah, now I'm very close to farming, definitely part-time, and on the journey, hopefully, my goal is to be farming full-time by the time I turn 40 years old.
You guys have just kind of come through, we were just talking about it before I hit record, coming through a drought and 18-month drought, which here in Michigan, we think a drought's like 30 days if we don't get rain.
Yeah.
You guys really know what drought's about. So let's talk about that as we get into the conversation here. Starting out first generation farmer, and then very early in your farming career here, dealing with a major natural disaster, natural issue that is putting many farms in your area out of business. What's that been like for you to live that journey? I know there's a lot of different ways to come about it, but just talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, for sure. So I have definitely learned that all the stereotypes of drought are there for a reason. Like it is, you talk about that was it 30-day drought you mentioned in Michigan? Like last year when I met you, we were in the middle of a 110-day period with literally not a raindrop. And then when the rain came, it was that full calendar year we had well under half our average rainfall, and our spring failed. So the whole cycle in our area of having a big feed wedge that your cattle can, the grass will finally get in front of them, and the hay production was just not there. And this was kind of the second year that happened. So I feel like people can sort of get through that first tough year. The second year came, doubled down on it. That was when pain really started to be felt, particularly in South Australia and Western Victoria. And there are parts of those two places that are still feeling drought. Like, again, we're so fortunate here on the Fleurieu. We've got a little bit of elevation close to the coast. We get rain here when it's raining, but an hour and a half, 2 hours north of us, I think in the gauge, we tipped out 30 millimetres, so just over an inch of rain. I think they had 2 millimetres. So, they're in the middle of their growing season and they're just getting nothing. So it'll be 2 completely wiped out years of production for those guys. And we're hanging on to hopefully rescue we don't want to lose a second. We're hanging on now. Not coming from a farming background at all, mate, but living in South Australia, we know what droughts are for sure. Not just the impacts in the country, and probably like the United States, that farming is it's a revered profession in Australia. You're part of our kind of like cultural makeup a little bit, the pastoralist, and so we hear stories of drought. But I lived in a town in the biggest city in South Australia, which now is quite large, be 1 million people. Back when I was a kid, it might have been 750, just to give you an idea of how big it was. And we had water, restrictions as a method of preserving water. So I do remember as a child, if you lived on a street and you had your address was an even number, so I lived at number 22, we were allowed to water our garden on Tuesday and Thursday. And then if you were an odd number, you could water your garden on the Monday and the Wednesday sort of thing. And so it is a dry place. We're kind of used to it, but it's when you've tied your business goals, your family goals, and your hopes and dreams in a lot of ways on the production of your farm, and there is not one thing you can do to rescue it. Drought hits very differently to the way it does when you're not on the land, I think. We were very fortunate, Paul. Amy and I bought the farm in 2019, and we immediately went into 3 La Nina years in a row. So we had 3 amazing seasons and right off the bat. And so that helped us set up, it helped us renegotiate our loans to be able to grow really quickly, and probably made me feel like farming was way easier than it was as well. So it was 3 La Nina years, and then basically I'm pretty sure this has been cited several times as just the worst drought on record, because of the length, and it's been exacerbated by really high input prices as well, and the hay is not available in our state, so we're trucking it in from, I guess the equivalent would be, for you guys, the state over from Wisconsin, like it's got to come all the way from there over, so you can imagine the freight bill on that stuff when it gets there.
Yeah, it doubles the price of it.
Yeah, so when it rains here, mate, it's like the emotion is just overjoy. It's the best. The sound of it's great, and it's been a tough couple of years, but I feel like we're still here and we're still having a go, and it's been good to have a second income.
Well, I think that's a point that's worth hitting on. We talked about that when you were here. I've had off-farm income for many of the years that I farmed. I was basically farming full-time and having a part-time or full-time job off the farm to be able to kind of grow that snowball, to build that, to get enough capital to make a viable operation. So what's that? Was that your original intent when you first got in? Hey, this is our goal. I'm gonna really hit it hard, both in my career and on the farm for this amount of time, and then move forward from there?
Was it the original intent? Kind of, but Amy is also a first generation farmer, and we've learned from scratch together, and she is an absolute powerhouse, mate, and I'm discovering that more and more every day as we grow the farm. I could not have been through any of even the good times where we were growing, any of that without like such a supportive partner. So, the idea was to really, when we moved here, the idea was to have a family home that was filled with kids we loved, that were happy and healthy. And if there's a little bit of space around us, maybe we can pay the council rates with a farming enterprise. But I feel like I might have found someone who completely understands this, Paul, because you have some similar traits to me. The day I bought my first trade steers was the day I got very addicted to farming, and I just had to grow it. So it was like, the switch was flicked, and there was no such thing as a small farm. I just had to get as big as possible, as quick as possible. Really similar to your story of like the satisfaction comes from the business success as much as it does from the fresh air and the animals and all the other things that a farm brings. So it sort of didn't quite start that way, but it happened pretty quickly that we decided, we can really have a go. We can have a go at this for sure.
What were some of the biggest barriers that you faced as somebody coming in from the outside of agriculture and wanting to really get ramped up and get rolling in an enterprise?
I have no formal agriculture qualifications, Paul. I watch hours and hours of YouTube, and I also I have sort of somewhat impatient with progress, so I like to just have a go and get things done. This would be a great time in the podcast to start to montage to all the different people in my life saying you need to keep Tom away from power tools. It's embarrassing. Some of the things I've done in the name of progress have been embarrassing is a good word. I think that it goes beyond that. Sometimes I think people stand back and go how how did you do that with nothing but an angle grinder and silicon? So the biggest challenge is I am learning everything as if I am like one of your children, mate. I'm basically a 5-year-old. I started this in 2020, and I have the farming knowledge of a 5-year-old that grew up on a farm, learning things for the first time. So that's been a real barrier, but YouTube is an incredible tool, and I never thought I'd speak about YouTube in any other way other than it's just this fun thing that you have on your phone or your tablet or whatever. But the knowledge transfer going on through YouTube is incredible. Even little menial things like why can't I get pressure back in my grease gun? That's something Granddad shows you in 2 minutes in a shed if you grow up on a farm, I'm sure. I just YouTube all of that stuff. Mate, like good ways of starting a fire, even just inside. Just don't learn that stuff at school. So just literally everything I have had to learn from scratch, which is fine. It's been so much fun as well. I look back and have a good laugh about some of those things. But that's just the little things, like the macro farming stuff as well, the agronomy, the animal health, much harder to learn and do well. So that's been a really steep learning curve. I think the compensation for that is like I'm a reasonably okay communicator, and I understand what a good business decision is, I suppose. So I can fluff my way through a lot of conversations with people who know what they're talking about to kind of get the info I need from them without making them feel like I'm completely useless. And I've also found like a core group of mentors and really good friends that have just, they help me. I'm not sure why they still do, but they stick around, and it's been awesome. So that probably knowledge base is a real barrier for me. No doubt.
Well, I know we joked about it a minute ago, but I think having an accounting background and having a passion for the numbers, at least for myself, I know that's really got me through a lot of places where I probably could have really screwed things up, but really being able to read the numbers, understand the numbers, and put a good plan together with the numbers, that really can get you out of a lot of trouble when it comes to a farming business. And you want to talk a little bit about that from your perspective?
That's my comfort zone, Paul. Sounds like it's probably one of your comfort zones as well. And I reckon I've tried enough different enterprises now. I've done enough budgets. I've applied for enough loans. I've had enough years in farming where I've got a lot of faith in them now. So if I look at a new enterprise, for example, and we've looked at a couple in the last 12 months, and if the numbers stack up, I have faith in them. Like, I know that the numbers I've put into them are based in fact, and I've got quotes for all of the inputs. I've got quotes for all of the CapEx. If the number comes out positive at the end, I really trust it and I go with it. And so I think when I was in Michigan, maybe were we feeding bobby calves by then? We'd just weaned bobby calves off milk, I think.
Okay. I don't remember I can't remember if you were or not at that point.
Yeah, so it was one or the other. It just hadn't started. But anyway, we've done our first sort of trial batch of bobby calves, and lots and lots of folks told me that there's no money in bottle feeding calves. And I take that, I say, yep, no, fair enough. There must be something to that. You must know about that. But my spreadsheet says there definitely is. There definitely is if you can achieve a few different KPIs, like the cost of the calf in, and you can buy a few things in bulk. And of course, like in farming, you're willing to accept that it might go a little bit pear-shaped. There might, the time cost might blow out. We set things up pretty well, I think, here. We didn't have that time blowout. I've got, a dozen trial little black bobby calves now that my cost of getting into them was $340, and the price of that you're probably thinking like $340, like they're worth.
That'd buy one leg here.
Exactly. Yeah. But for us, this is a way that I didn't have to get any more cattle finance. Like I didn't have to borrow, I didn't have to borrow $11,000 or $12,000 to get into a trade, a little small trade. I could do that with cash flow, enterprise stacked up on paper. Let's give it a go. Now, I don't know, it might even be too early to talk about, Paul, at this stage, but we're really looking hard at pasture-raised eggs.
Yeah, I remember when you were here, you were kind of in the midst of getting quotes for that and putting that proposal together and looking at that hard.
Yeah, absolutely. And that to me is like a genuine stepping stone towards farming full-time by 40. And Amy really likes the business model as well. It's a really neat and tidy business model that integrates beautifully with beef cattle. So these are caravans with chickens that people might have seen around. The chickens are fed almost entirely by grain mix. So you import all of their feed, and they kind of just turn it into a nitrogen-rich manure if you're on a beef cattle farm and they're running in the same paddocks. So that's what I like about it. It stacks really nicely. They've got a small footprint, and it's relatively inexpensive to get into compared with other things you can do on a farm, like buy a new tractor. It's pretty much the same price. So we're really looking hard at that, and I'm not going to say we're doing it or not doing it, but I feel like we've progressed in a positive way since we last spoke. We're doing that. And again, the numbers work. There's no reason for me to doubt them. I think it looks good and it's a comfort zone. So, look to give you an update in a few months, Paul.
You just talked about enterprise stacking, and that's something I guess we look back 100 years ago and we just called that a farm, right? You had 3 pigs, a couple of chickens, and a milk cow, and today, a lot of enterprises are very focused on one commodity, but I think there is something to really looking at your business, looking at your assets that you've already invested in, and say, how can we leverage these in a cost-effective manner to provide another revenue stream for the enterprise? And I think that's a very insightful way that you're looking at your operation, and I think that's a way that especially first-generation farmers or farms that have not very much equity. I've been there for a long time as I got started farming. You don't start with a lot, so you have a very little equity. But how do you leverage that and get your cash flow ramped up to be able to maybe take on a little bit more leverage and then ramp up even further? And that was always my focus, is just really utilizing the assets that I invested in as much as possible to create as much cash off of those assets. And I think that's what you're referring to here.
100%. And there are enterprises that stack really nicely and then some that are clunky. But one thing that I learned from you, Paul, is that if you've gone to the effort and the struggle and taken the big step to buy a farm, and and I just use the example of a shed because I think we both have that kind of maybe story. Like, it doesn't matter how bad a shed is. It doesn't matter where it is on your farm. Basically, if it keeps the rain out, it can be converted into an income stream somehow. And that is definitely something I learned from your conversions of turkey coops and even just renting space to a neighbor. Like, that to me is enterprise stacking. It's turning a dead space into something. For us, it's an old shearing shed into a calf rearing shed. Honestly, mate, when I'm out there, I think this is very Paul Windermower. I'm turning nothing into something, because literally you haven't got that ability to maybe lean on your parents' business for them to finance you into it, or your grandparents' business. You've got power tools, And generally, and this probably ties a little bit into the Nuffield study, is generally I found first gen people have a pretty good work ethic, and they're also willing to do a whole lot of jobs that the average Joe either thinks are like beneath them. They probably are beneath them, but the desire is so strong to build the business that shovel, gloves, safety goggles. Let's do the conversion myself. And so I think enterprise stacking, like as you say, it's just farming. But there are some things that stack really, really well, and chickens and beef stack really, really well. One thing I saw in Ireland, shout out to Cotter Brothers Firewood, is that firewood business on the sheep farm. They just kind of dance around each other. They don't impede on each other. Sure, you can see two businesses at that place, very distinct businesses. Logs down the side of the road, lots of timber in the yard, but they don't step on each other's toes, and it works beautifully. And you don't have to buy a second property. And a lot of the time you can use, and that's the best stacking, I think, is when you can use a lot of the same equipment, even if it's just forklifts or quad bikes or trucks, a site office, for example. That's when it works really, really well together. So that's just one example that comes to mind of the stacking. But yeah, look, I see massive opportunities too in agritourism. I think that kind of stacks onto a farm really nicely without taking up a big footprint. That's the beauty of chickens. It doesn't displace anything else. There might come a time when something else pops up, like the shed factor is something. If you've got the shed, the footprint's already occupied, do something inside it. Even like a mezzanine floor in a shed is basically creating another little enterprise, if it's a storage one or if it's for something. So yeah, that's just extracting every dollar out of what you've already got. The Paul Windemuller return on asset model, mate, as I call it.
Well, speaking of that, your topic, you're a Nuffield scholar, just like myself, same year, and that's how we got the opportunity to meet when we were in Brazil. What is exactly your topic that you've been studying, and where is that taking you so far?
So the topic is business models for first gen and next gen entrants into farming and fishing. So first gen is my passion, and next gen people, like next gen is kind of like a term I've kind of come up with for children of successful farming families that are kind of experiencing a lot of the same issues as first gen farmers, in that land price soars. They haven't got equity to buy the things from the land. So there needs to be these new business models to kind of like help them get in, much the same as a first gen farmer. So I've been looking, so there's been things I've been trying to really avoid, and then things I've been looking at. I really wanted to avoid any kind of government subsidy. Like, is there a grant to help a first gen person get into something? Because that's maybe too self-explanatory or too easy. Like I've been looking for like genuine business models, or like creative financing options, or clever entity structures that have helped first gen people get into farming. Which probably is why I was like very drawn to you, mate. Like, your story is very genuine, very creative financing solutions, we'll put it that way, because like you have to turn water to wine in a way.
Exactly.
And so you've got to come up with stories. So look, if just rattling off the top of my head, and I don't have my report up to jog my memory here, but things like you almost need to accept that the first gen person or the next gen person is going to have a second job. You just kind of have to, for the maths to work. So any of your business models or your entity structures have to accommodate your ability to have a second job and a source of income. And so you might call, this office I'm in enterprise stacking in a way, because I run a accounting business from the office and it's on the farm. So the things that I look at are definitely enterprise stacking, a second job which allows you to work on the farm. So I know it's hard. Maybe it's not a very fair recommendation, because some people have skill sets that lend themselves towards jobs where you have to be on site, like a builder or something. But your job as a dairy consultant allowed a little bit of flexibility, bit of farm, bit of on site. I really think it's worth just spending a little bit of time on either we have the Australian Tax Office, you have the IRS, the tax department in your country, just working out what you can do, what you can't do, and do it as early as you can in your farming or business process, so that you don't have to retrofit later. And what I mean by that is you need to review who you are, where you want to be, what business you want to do. And for me, it was, I have a wife, a spouse. You might have the same. Are we going to be a partnership in this? Are we going to start how big are we going to grow? Does it need to be a company? Is there a structure that's going to suit us 5 years from now? And you kind of have to be I think just ahead of the game in first gen, because you've probably got less margin for error. You've got less money to spend fixing stuff. Look, the beauty of being an accountant is that I think that almost it's sort of like inbuilt in your thought process a lot of the time. Like, you won't proceed until you feel like you've got it right. So it is really helpful, which is why I'm saying just spend some time with someone who can help you with that before you get started. So there are some other business models I've seen, and they revolve around enterprises which you can sort of incrementally build without huge capital outlay. And one that comes to mind, again, shout out to Ifan from Wales, building a dairy cow herd and leasing those cows back to the dairies he's working on. The great thing about cattle is you can buy 1 or 2 or 5 or 20. You don't have to spend $1 million on day one. So that incremental reinvestment. And the other thing, there's a lot of first-gen people I've met that kind of operate this hub and spoke type farm, is what I'm calling it, which is you buy the first property and you buy whatever you can afford to get into and try and have as many useful things on that farm as possible. So cattle yards, sheds, storage, and then lease, rent, adjust land around you so that you can grow your business there, and at the same time grow equity in your herd, whatever it may be. I just use a lot of cattle examples. So grow equity in your herd on profitable lease or rented land. I find, at least in Australia at the moment, the profits actually come from the leased land, because interest rates they're not high by historical standards, but they're high by the relative to the commodity price, so that we don't really make any money on the owned land because of the interest bill tied to it, but we do on the leased land, and that enables us to grow a herd. And we focused up until now on breeding cows. So we grow the number of breeding cows we have on other land, such that when the time comes, we can liquidate those to buy the next block. And that incremental thing is really helpful for people that have no capital to get straight into it. Then enter the entity structures. Some really creative ones I've come across. Sometimes it's funny, you travel all over the world and then realize these things were like right under your nose, and you just didn't look at them the same way as when you got back from visiting places. But a model I came across in Tasmania, again, sort of tangled up with a Nuffield scholar, a previous Nuffield scholar, where the dairy farms owned by a syndicate offering their managers what they describe as shadow equity. It could also be, it's a bit like an employee share scheme, but that syndicate had sort of quantified that the difference between a good farm manager and an average farm manager can be anywhere between $500,000 and $1 million a year. So they basically identify a great farm manager and say, you're an owner now, you're in the syndicate with us, just please stay and run this place well. And so that was a way that enabled a first generation or person from a non-farming background to actually have a form of equity in a farming business. And of course, as the pie grows, their slice grows, and they're able to do new things as well. They might be able to buy a small neighbouring block, lease it back to the syndicate, grow the farm. And then if we've got time, Paul, to just describe one other structure that I saw in Canada, which I really like and think, I think has a lot of promise. It might exist in other countries, but it's not as sort of slick and defined as it was in Canada, and that's this thing called the estate freeze. I've thought a lot about how I might describe the estate freeze to a room full of people when I present my work, because it is quite a technical thing to execute, and it's very boring if you're not actually an accountant or someone interested in this space. But it is a really good method of having a win-win for previous generation of farm business owner and entering generation of farm business owner, where the previous generation can freeze the value of the estate by creating new classes of shares. Their original class of shares will stay the same value as at the date of the freeze, and the actual effect that has is they're basically saying, this is the day we've frozen the value and we're going to defer any of the future tax liability on the growth to the new generations. So they say, well, that's a win for me because I want to defer my tax. That's great. And the creation of the new shares allows a new entrant to come in. The new shares on the day of the freeze are valued at nothing, so they don't have to buy them. They just get a valueless share in a company. It might be so the tier of the shares go down, so A, B, C. They don't get a ordinary share, but they get a Class B share. Now, as the value of the whole enterprise grows, their Class B share also grows. So they're the ones taking on the tax liability for the growth in the enterprise. So they win because they get in for free on day one, and they grow the business, and they say, "Oh, I'm now a 1/12th owner of the operating company that my parents set up." And the parents are saying, "Yeah, we actually made enough money. We've got to a point where we're still owners of this thing. We're still the ordinary share owners. We're number one." They don't feel like they have to let go of anything, which ticks. I've found a lot of boxes for people that are struggling with that transition, but their kids are employed. And I saw a big successful cropping operation in Saskatchewan that employed this model, and they had generation one, and they had 4 cousins working below them that had all entered the business at different times with a different tier of share.
Oh, that would make sense for different timeframes like that for people to enter. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I feel terrible for the accountant that has to do the books at the end of every year because they've got to do that sum over and over again with all these different tiers. But it's allowed 4 cousins to enter the farm at different stages of life with the same rules, level playing field. You can all come back whenever you want. You get a worthless share on day one, and as the business grows, your share value grows. And I thought, that's just a lovely balance, and it might solve a few it might be the answer to a few debates in lots of other countries about, I came back to the farm when I was 18. I've been here for 10 years, and now my cousin wants to come back, and he wants the same slice as me. Well, yeah, you can have the same slice. The slice is worth $0 today, and you grow it like I grew it. And so I really like that model. And of course, it would work for non-farming families if you joined a family who identified you as a really good person to have in the business. You come back, you get a valueless share on day one, you all grow the pie together. So I thought that was a really good a model as well, which I'd like to learn more about and see if it applies in other places.
What's been your favorite story that you've come across in your journey that you thought, wow, maybe not from a structure standpoint, but just genuine story that really inspired you?
Well, mate, the answer would be your story, like quite comfortably. So I'm not sure if you're trying to get that answer out of me.
No. You told me some pretty interesting stories when you were here. So I found some pretty fascinating stories that you told me.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, if I'm not allowed to say your story, because there's so much to like about your story, and it's not just on the farm side of things. Like when you walk under those 2 maple trees into the front door of your house, that to me is where the success is. Like there's just a very happy, healthy family living in that house, and that's what I loved about the Windamalla story, because the farm is successful. It started from scratch, but it's serving all of those other purposes of sustaining just a good, happy family of people. So that's why I think your story is up there with the absolute best of them, Paul, to be honest. If I have to pick some others, the common thread would be that there is this like real drive to continually succeed, work really hard and build something. And I came across a female fishing boat captain in Alaska who has a really good story of chipping away. That it's like, we sort of kept commenting, her and I, that there was no secret recipe, like there was no ingredient, so to speak, that she found where it all became big. She just kept making good decisions at the right time with small impacts that have added up to her owning her own vessel in Alaska, having her own fishing quota, and just a really good little business that's working for her. It's serving her the way she wants to live really well. She lives on the fishing boat a lot of the time too. She has a crew which is almost all female as well, which I thought was, in the fishing industry, at least here, is like unheard of just about. And so her story was one of, again, just a first-gen person she had some sort of maritime skills, if you put it that way, from sailing the Great Lakes and working as in like a tour business of the Great Lakes. So she just translated that to fishing at one point and grew and leveraged relationships and I think which is another part of something I think you have to really do in first gen is like leverage relationships, maybe like leverage your brand a little bit as well. You need to sort of make people want to help you. And that's certainly what she did. An old skipper who had sort of failing health at the time leased her the quota to go fishing. So again, sometimes things have to go your way a little bit too. But I just really liked her story. I think she's like definitely sort of going against the grain and working really hard to build that business, which is, I really like that story too. And I could go on, Paul, but I know we're getting close to that hour, mate, and we better move on with your list of questions. I'm sure we've probably only got through like 2 of them. So
no, that I love hearing other people's stories and being inspired by those. That's what inspired me to do what we did here, and appreciate those kind words that you said. But I think there's the more you dig, the more of those stories you find, and I think that's one of the reasons why we started the podcast is to be able to tell other stories like your own. So I appreciate you bringing those up. What systems of support? I mean, you talked about mentors, you talked about other people that you've met in the industry. We've talked about YouTube. What other support mechanisms would you really encourage young producers or first-generation farmers to look at in order to succeed?
If your area has like a local farmers network or farming systems group, I joined ours pretty early on just to meet people and hear what they're doing and really copy them. Like just use that as a template. And maybe an extension to that support network is what's worked for me, and it might work for other people, is just admit you don't know everything. In fact, admit you don't know anything, because that's where it was. Just admit it. Don't try and come across as someone who's like a prodigy or anything, because you're probably not. And I think you sort of endear yourself to people when you admit that you've got something wrong, or you admit you did it wrong, and you're looking for help. You know, you're just sort of like humbly seeking some advice, and they'll 9 out of 10 times, probably 10 out of 10 times, they'll give you a steer in the right direction. So, local farmers group, something that I've kind of come to do as well, Paul, is I always pay, like when I receive an invoice or a bill, I pay it either the day I get it or just as soon as I can, straight after I get the bill. And I haven't noticed all of our suppliers say this, but a number of them will comment on, "Hey, you're a really good payer. Like you paid that invoice. It was scary, like 9 minutes after I sent it." And so I think what I'm trying to do there is, I'm trying to pay my bills, obviously, but I'm also trying to build this sense of, oh, he's a customer that like we'll get to. We want to help them out because we know that he'll probably pay the bill in like within a day, and if he comes up and asks for something that is a 1%er or needs like a little bit of extra help, we're happy to give it to that guy because he pays his bills on time, and I certainly feel that way about people that pay our bills on time. So I think that's something you can do, is like you can leverage your supplier network as a support network if you just treat them properly. So, don't order goods if you know you don't have the money in your account. Like don't try and expect something from people for nothing. Just use that supplier network as a group of people who want to help you, because they do want to help you, and they've also got like a financial interest in helping you. So like repay that to them. So I think that's worked pretty well for us. And it might mean something. It might mean like you get something done on a Sunday that you'd never get done otherwise, or whatever. So there's that. I think just, it might be easier said than done, but like I've made friends in the area relatively quickly. And like you don't have to be in the country to do this, but friendships go both ways. Like try and volunteer some of your time so that they feel like they might do the same back down the track. It helps that my friends are, they've got 9 tractors and all the big gear, and they can get you out of a really sticky situation really quickly, and they are people that grew up on farms, so they know what they're doing. But just be good to them. If they ring you up with a tax question, help them out same way they help you out with the farming question. So just go help lay their turf if they need a hand in the garden. Just go do the stuff, build the relationships, and that's certainly something I'd recommend. And then probably the last one, which more of a first gen thing, is you will have really rewarding relationships with sort of outgoing or retiring farmers if you listen to them, get their advice, implement their advice, and particularly if they have children who are not interested in farming. I've found a few older fellas that are kind of retiring that have loved having a young person listen to them and be interested in their farm. And that, again, you can, as a first gen person, that has massive benefits because they've got years of knowledge of farming in your area. They've got all these tips and tricks. They've got all the tools. They've got lots of their own relationships, and you also just get like a really good sort of friendship mentor relationship out of it. So there's some things off the top of my head, Paul, I'd recommend for support networks.
No, that's great advice. But to wrap up here, one thing that I wanted to ask you, ups and downs that you've been through, especially with the drought, what do you do for mindset and to stay resilient in your business?
Yeah, good question. I wish there was a playbook. It's sort of different every day, but like fundamentally, I have an amazing wife and really good kids, like really lovely kids to be around. So the family is the reset. So long as they're okay, everything else could blow away in a hurricane or whatever, like we'll press on sort of thing. So we have a really good routine here, day by day. It's pretty similar to you guys, Paul. Like we have breakfast together, then I go and do my things. I generally am back for lunch. If they're around, we have lunch together. We always have dinner together at 5:00, and then we do stories and bedtime. And so I think just having like a non-farm routine that is always going to be there. It's always calm and lovely. And Amy is a massive, massive part of that, because I never get home to chaos or to just broken down things. It's just happy. This great happy family, and that honestly is such a massively undervalued contribution to a successful business, is having like a really good partner who supports the business. But also, like, it's not like I do farming and Amy does family. Like we both do both a lot. Again, really, really similar to you guys. Like you both have to do both. So Amy does a lot on the farm, and I spend a lot of time with the kids. And it probably just, it's diversification, right? If you got more things on the go, you've got more margin for one of those things to not go so well and it not completely destroy your mindset. I think that's my key anyway, Paul. It's probably easy for me to say with a relatively small farming business, but I think at the moment, mate, it's all about the happy, cohesive, good, new little core family going on. So as I say that, I can hear one of them very upset outside the door. I did take the permanent marker away from Daisy this morning because she wanted to bring it into bed without the lid on. So
we all have challenges, right?
yeah, that's right. So but yeah, mate, that's kind of where I get my calm and quiet from.
Tom, I really appreciate you being on the podcast today and sharing your wisdom, your insights, the things you've learned on your Nuffield travels, and look forward to someday hopefully making it down to South Australia to see your little slice of the pie down there, and look forward to hearing more of you and your family growing your business.
Thank you so much, Paul. Lovely to chat to you, mate. Great to hear your voice again. Hope you have a beautiful day there in Coopersville, Michigan, and say hi to the Windermuller family.
Hey, thank you once again for listening to this episode of the AgCulture Podcast with Tom Cosentino. Like I mentioned, check out our show notes. His information, the link up with him should be in there. And would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. And if you would be so kind as to share it with somebody you know, we really appreciate that as well. Also, check out our social media platforms, including my personal stuff. If you want to see what I'm up to, I will be doing some more traveling here in the upcoming months, so keep an eye out for some of that. That should be fun. And just thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. I really do. With that, we'll see you next week for another exciting episode of the AgCulture Podcast.